The Second Great Commandment, written and read by Brother Jerry Valenti. When Jesus was asked to identify the greatest commandment in the law of Moses, he replied, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first and great commandment." However, Jesus had two great commandments in mind that day. Quoting from Leviticus 19:18, he continues with the second great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Matthew 22:39 and 40, and Mark 12:31. The last sentence of these verses is very interesting. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. What this is saying is that if you can just keep these two great commandments, you will automatically be keeping all of the laws in the law of Moses and living up to all of the instructions that God issued through his prophets, without having to memorize any of them. For an example of how this works, look at the 10 Commandments. If you love God with all of your heart, you won't put other gods before him, you won't worship idols, and you won't take his name in vain. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you won't kill him, or steal from him, or have sex with his wife. Clearly, these are two great commandments that Jesus has shared. In the previous blog article, we discussed loving God. For the rest of this one, we'll consider what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. The first question one might ask is, who is your neighbor? Obviously, it's not limited to the people who live on your street. Of course, you can start there. Every day when I drive down my street, I ask God to protect all of my neighbors, even the ones who have left nasty notes on my car, even the woman who will probably pull a muscle in her neck someday from turning her head away so quickly when she sees us in front of the house, and even the man who thinks my name is Steve. But the second great commandment extends well beyond our physical neighborhoods. Jesus is really saying that any person who you come in contact with is your neighbor. On another occasion, he even said that you should love your enemies. Clearly, there should be no person who falls outside of the definition of your neighbor in this second great commandment. Okay, so we should love everybody. But then what is meant by love? It's not the same as how we love our spouse, or how we love our relatives, or how we love our friends, is it? No, it's not exactly that kind of love, the kind in which feelings are involved and we enjoy intimacy or spending time together. So what kind of love is it then? Well, on one of the occasions when the two great commandments were being discussed, Jesus was asked to elaborate on the definition of loving your neighbor. He did so by relating a famous parable, the one entitled The Good Samaritan. In the parable, a man is traveling and is attacked and robbed and left for dead. A priest comes along and sees the man lying in the street. Perhaps thinking, well, he's not a member of my church, he crosses the street and just keeps walking. A Levite man comes along and, perhaps thinking, there's nothing in the law that requires me to get involved, he also crosses the street and keeps walking. Finally, a Samaritan man comes along and takes care of the injured man. He brings him to an inn and pays for his room and board. He tells the innkeeper to give him whatever he needs, and he will reimburse him when he comes again. In short, the Samaritan is there for the injured man, doing whatever he can to take care of this man, a total stranger, at his time of need. Jesus concludes the parable by asking which of the three men who walked by was the good neighbor to the injured man. Obviously, it was the Samaritan, the one who had compassion for a stranger, saw the need, and jumped in to assist. Jesus says, "Go and do thou likewise," in Luke 10:37. From this parable, it's clear that when Jesus says to love your neighbor, he's using love as an action word. As he taught in the Sermon on the Mount, we're to treat others as we want to be treated, not only by not harming them, but also by helping them in their time of need. While it may be true that we can't help everybody, there are many times when we are presented with an opportunity to be there for someone. The person may be a total stranger, or maybe someone who's mistreated us in the past. The person may not deserve any kindness whatsoever. It doesn't matter. Regardless of who it is, we should be ready and willing to show compassion to a fellow human being whenever we can. Keeping the second great commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself means that you do your best to show the love of Christ to all people at all times. As Jesus stated on another occasion, you should do this that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven.